The air was thick with anticipation as passengers crowded near the gate, waiting for the last call to board. It was an early morning flight, and the usual hum of travelers rushing to get through the boarding process filled the air. I was no exception. I had been traveling non-stop for the last week and was more than ready to get some rest during the short flight. But the tension in the air that morning felt different, something was off. As I approached the gate, I noticed the two agents standing by the door. They were scanning tickets with their usual indifference, but when they looked up to check my boarding pass, their expressions froze. One of them, a man in his mid-30s, looked me up and down as if he had seen a ghost. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone suddenly sharp and official. "Could you step aside for a moment?" I paused, confused but compliant. "Is there an issue?" The woman standing beside him, slightly older and wearing dark sunglasses, stepped forward with a clipboard. "We need to verify your identity," she said, though there was something in her voice that made me pause. She wasn't making eye contact, something was off. I glanced around at the people who had already boarded. A couple of others looked my way, but no one seemed particularly concerned. Yet, for some reason, I felt like a target. They led me a few feet away from the gate, and that's when I realized how quiet the airport had become. Even the usual hum of announcements had faded into a background buzz. I glanced at the agents again, their eyes now shifting nervously between each other as though they were afraid to make eye contact. "Is there a problem?" I asked again, more firmly this time, my patience starting to wear thin. The man hesitated, then took a deep breath. "We need to confirm your details. Could you please hold on for just a moment?" "Sure," I replied, my voice level. I wasn't sure why I was being singled out, but I knew that staying calm was the best way to deal with whatever this was. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. This was no ordinary flight check. The minutes felt like hours. The noise from the busy terminal became a distant hum, like the world had muffled itself. I stood by the gate, feeling the cold stares of the passengers who had already boarded, their curious eyes flicking between me and the agents. My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag as I fought to remain calm. Finally, the woman with the clipboard spoke up again. "Ma'am, we just need to confirm a few things before you can board. It's standard procedure." I nodded, still not understanding what was going on. Standard procedure? I had flown countless times, this was far from standard. "Do you mind if we take a moment to verify your flight details?" she asked, though it didn't sound like a question. Before I could respond, a man in a dark suit, one I hadn't noticed before, approached the group. He seemed out of place, too formal for a typical airport employee. His shoes clicked sharply against the tile floor as he walked up, and I could sense a shift in the atmosphere the moment he arrived. "Everything all right here?" he asked, looking directly at the agents. "Just verifying some details, sir," the agent replied, her voice suddenly lower. There was a hint of uncertainty now, like she was trying to explain away something she didn't fully understand. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, his sharp gaze turned toward me, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt an unsettling sense of recognition. He studied me closely, and a small but noticeable flash of recognition flickered across his face. "May I see your ID, please?" he asked, his voice neutral but commanding. I reached into my bag and handed over my driver's license. He examined it for a moment, his fingers tapping against the surface of the plastic before his eyes shifted toward the agents. "Does this match the information you have on file?" he asked, his tone flat. The agents exchanged quick, uneasy glances. Neither of them responded. "Is there something wrong?" I repeated, my patience thin now. I didn't know who this man was or what he wanted, but the tension was becoming unbearable. The longer I stood there, the more I began to sense that this was not just about my ticket. The agent with the clipboard shifted uncomfortably and spoke to the man quietly. "We were just, going through her details. Something about her flight, we needed to double-check." The man nodded slowly, eyes still trained on me. I see, he said, his voice laced with a touch of something else. Was it recognition? I'll take it from here. Without another word, he turned and gestured for me to follow him. The agent stood motionless, watching us as we walked away. I had no choice but to obey, my mind racing with questions. Why was he so interested in me? Why did everything feel so strange? I followed him, trying to suppress the growing anxiety gnawing at my chest. As we walked down a quiet hallway, he spoke again, his voice quiet, as though he didn't want anyone to overhear. I need to ask you a few questions about your affiliation with the company, he said, his gaze flicking over his shoulder to make sure we weren't being overheard. Is that all right? I could feel my heart rate pick up. Company? What company? I'm not sure what you mean, I replied, my voice steady but unsure. I'm just here to get on my flight. I don't work for any company here. He didn't respond immediately, but his eyes narrowed as he looked at me with more intensity. Then, finally, he asked in a low voice, "Are you sure?" It was at that moment that I realized, this wasn't a random mistake. Something far bigger was happening, and I had no idea where this was going. We walked in silence for a few more moments until we reached a small, secluded office just off the main terminal. The man opened the door and motioned for me to step inside. The room was sterile, with beige walls and a single desk cluttered with papers and a few old magazines. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights above. "Please, have a seat," he said, his voice unusually calm now. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down in one of the chairs across from the desk. He closed the door behind him with a soft click and took a seat across from me, folding his hands in front of him. The look on his face was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, almost piercing. He stared at me for a moment, as if considering how to approach the next part of this conversation. "Let's get straight to it," he said finally. "I don't know if you're aware of this, but your presence here today is, well, it's not a coincidence." I raised an eyebrow, trying to remain composed. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. "The flight you were trying to board," he began, his voice low, "is part of a much bigger operation. And you," he paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You're more important than you realize." I blinked, completely thrown off guard by the direction this conversation was taking. "I'm just a passenger." "What are you talking about?" The man let out a long sigh and leaned back in his chair. "You're not just any passenger. You're part of something much bigger. You're tied to a company, an emerging tech giant, actually. You might not realize it, but your name is at the center of a billion-dollar deal that could change the future of technology." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "I think you're mistaken. I'm just on my way to a business meeting. I'm not involved in any of that." He shook his head. "You're telling me you don't know who you are? What you've become?" He seemed almost incredulous, his eyebrows furrowing as though he couldn't believe I was denying it. "What are you talking about?" My voice was sharper now, confusion turning into frustration. I had no idea what this man was implying. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped a few keys, then slid it across the table to me. "Take a look for yourself." I reluctantly picked up the tablet and stared at the screen. A profile picture of me stared back, along with a detailed bio. But the most startling part was the company name listed beneath my photo, Future Tech Incorporated. The description that followed sent a jolt of panic through me. Future Tech Incorporated, a tech startup led by the unassuming heir of the Peterson fortune. Specializing in cutting-edge AI and quantum computing, with a projected $1 billion valuation in the next 5 years. My hands trembled slightly as I scanned the words. This couldn't be real. I had never heard of this company, let alone been involved with it. I don't understand, I stammered, setting the tablet back on the table. "This is all a mistake. I'm just a business consultant. I have nothing to do with any tech startup. The man leaned forward again, his expression hardening. I don't think you realize just how important you are right now. Your company, the one you supposedly have no connection to, is counting on you. You're being watched. Everything you do, every decision you make, could determine the future of this billion-dollar deal. I shook my head, the weight of the situation beginning to press down on me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to catch my flight. The man's eyes softened slightly. I wish it were that simple, he said quietly. But it's not. You're being pulled into something bigger than you. This is bigger than any flight, any meeting. The people you're working with, they know who you are, even if you don't. I stood up abruptly, my mind racing. This is insane. I'm leaving. As I turned to the door, the man didn't stop me, but his final words echoed in my mind, you can leave, but you won't be able to escape what's coming next. I stepped into the hallway, the reality of what had just happened sinking in like a stone in my stomach. Whatever had just unfolded, whatever this man had hinted at, it was only the beginning. And I had a feeling that once I walked through that airport gate, my life would never be the same. I walked down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hum of the airport terminal seemed distant now, as though I were moving through a different world. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, but no matter how many times I turned the words over, nothing made sense. I wasn't involved in any tech startup. I had no idea who these people thought I was. When I reached the gate again, I noticed that the flight attendants had already started to board the next group of passengers. A few people turned to look at me as I approached, but I didn't care. The rush of emotions, confusion, anger, fear, pushed me forward like a wave. But as I stepped forward to show my boarding pass, the man in the dark suit from earlier stepped out in front of me, blocking my path. Not so fast, he said, his voice much colder than before. You can't board just yet. I froze, a sudden spike of panic twisting in my chest. What do you want from me? He didn't respond immediately. His gaze shifted to the flight attendants, who looked uneasily at him. One of them, a young woman with nervous eyes, whispered something to him, but he ignored her, his attention fully focused on me. We've got a problem, he said flatly, looking at me like I was the one to blame. What kind of problem? I demanded, my voice shaky but firm. I've had enough of these games. If this is some sort of mistake, I want it fixed now. The man's eyes narrowed. You really have no idea what's going on, do you? He muttered under his breath. Then, louder, he addressed the attendants. Keep her here. I'll be right back. Before I could protest, he turned and walked away with a purposeful stride. I stood there, feeling the weight of his words like a lead weight pulling me down. What was going on? Why was this happening to me? A few minutes later, the woman from earlier returned, her eyes darting between me and the agent stationed nearby. We need to escort you to a different area, she said quickly. Her voice was strained, as if she were trying to get through the situation without drawing attention. Please follow me. I didn't have a choice. I followed her down a series of winding corridors, away from the main part of the airport. The further we went, the quieter it became. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and my shoes clicked against the hard tile floor. My mind raced, trying to piece together everything that had happened since I first walked through security. I had no idea who was behind all of this, or why I had suddenly become the center of attention. Finally, we arrived at a small, nondescript door tucked away behind a row of maintenance carts. The woman knocked twice before turning the handle. She opened the door and motioned for me to step inside. Wait here, she instructed, closing the door behind her. The room was dimly lit, with no windows. There was a long table in the center, a few chairs around it. In the far corner was a small desk with an old desktop computer, the kind that hadn't been touched in years. It felt more like a storage closet than an actual room for discussion, but I knew better than to question it. I took a seat at the table, my mind racing as I tried to figure out what was happening. I wasn't sure how long I sat there. Time seemed to stretch in that sterile room, every second adding to my anxiety. Eventually, the door opened again, but this time it wasn't the woman. The man in the dark suit stepped back inside, flanked by two other men I hadn't seen before. Both were dressed in sharp, professional attire, their faces unreadable. One of the men, the taller of the two, spoke first. "We need to have a more detailed conversation about your involvement with Future Tech Incorporated," he said, his voice low and authoritative. I stood up quickly. "I told you, I have no involvement with any company." The man gave a thin smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's where you're wrong," he said, his voice dripping with a cold certainty. "You're deeply involved, and if you're going to make it through this without getting caught in the crossfire, you'd better start understanding what's really at stake here." My heart raced as his words sank in. What did he mean by crossfire? What was really happening? He leaned in, his face just inches from mine. "You're not just a consultant, are you? You've got a future in this company, whether you know it or not. And if you're smart, you'll start paying attention to what's unfolding around you. Because soon enough, everyone will want a piece of what you're holding." The words hung in the air like a threat, and I could feel the cold sweat starting to form on the back of my neck. What was it that I was holding? I had to figure out who these people were, and why they were so sure about my connection to something I had no memory of. Something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. I just needed to survive long enough to uncover the truth. I sat frozen in my chair, the man's words echoing in my mind like a constant, unsettling drumbeat. "What am I holding?" I repeated under my breath, not sure if I was asking the question aloud or to myself. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped back and motioned for the other two men to take a seat across from me. They both sat down without saying a word, their gazes never leaving me. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from tense to outright suffocating. I could feel my pulse in my throat as the silence stretched between us. "I know you're confused," the man said finally, his tone much less aggressive now. "That's to be expected. But you need to understand something very important." He leaned forward again, his voice low and steady. "You are part of a very exclusive operation, one that no one outside of a very select few knows about. This is bigger than any startup you've ever heard of." My mind was still spinning. What was he talking about? Exclusive operation? I wasn't part of any operation, let alone some high-stakes, billion-dollar venture. I had no idea what he was implying. He seemed to sense my disbelief. "Let's be clear, you're not some random consultant. You've been targeted for a reason." He gave me a moment to process that, before adding, "The deal we're talking about, the future of Future Tech Incorporated, it all hinges on you." I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised a hand, signaling me to stop. "Don't bother denying it," he continued, his eyes sharp. "We've already seen the signs. Your connection, your potential. It's all lined up. The only question now is whether you're going to fight it or embrace what's coming." My breath caught in my chest. "I have no connection to any of this," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm just a business consultant. That's all I've ever been." The man didn't flinch. He simply nodded, as if he'd heard that response 1,000 times before. "Maybe you don't remember everything yet," he said quietly. "But the truth will come to light soon enough. The question is, how much of the truth are you ready to face?" He stood up abruptly and gestured for the others to follow. "We'll give you time to think," he said, his voice hardening again. "But understand this, your life as you know it is over. There's no going back." With that, they left, leaving me alone in the cold, dimly lit room. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my mind a whirlpool of confusion and fear. I had no answers, no idea what was happening or what kind of game these people were playing. But one thing was clear, they weren't going to let me walk away from this. I stood up shakily, my legs trembling beneath me. I had to get out of this room. I had to clear my head. I didn't know how, but I knew I couldn't trust anyone here, not the gate agents, not the mysterious man in the suit, not anyone. As I walked back toward the door, the reality of what had happened, and what was still unfolding, settled into me like a weight. I wasn't just a passenger. I wasn't just some innocent traveler caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was at the center of something dangerous, something powerful, and I had no idea how to escape it. But there was one thing I did know: I had to get to the bottom of this, or I might never have a chance to escape. The real question now wasn't what I was holding, it was how much I was willing to risk to uncover the truth. I stood outside the room, my heart still pounding in my chest, my mind racing with everything I had just been told. The cold, sterile hallway stretched ahead, and the silence felt oppressive. I had no idea where I was or how I was supposed to move forward. My instincts told me to get as far away from this place as possible, but I knew deep down that leaving wasn't an option. If I ran now, they'd find me. They were already watching, already waiting for me to make a move. And there was no doubt in my mind, whoever they were, whatever they were involved in, it was big. Too big to ignore. I took a deep breath and forced my legs to move, making my way down the hallway. My steps were slow, calculated. I needed information. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them standing here. But finding the truth in this maze of lies and half-truths wouldn't be easy. I had to be careful. One wrong move, and I could be trapped in a web of deceit that I might never escape. As I walked, the sound of my footsteps echoed through the empty corridor. A flicker of movement caught my eye from a shadowed doorway. I froze, my senses on high alert. I couldn't afford to be seen or heard right now, not by anyone who might be connected to this operation. I waited, my breath shallow, my eyes scanning the dim hallway for any sign of danger. The door creaked open slightly, and a voice called out in a low, urgent whisper. "Hey! You there?" I turned to see a figure step out of the shadows, a woman, in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and dressed in a simple yet professional outfit. She looked hurried, her eyes scanning the hallway nervously. She motioned for me to come closer. Without thinking, I walked toward her, keeping my steps as quiet as possible. She glanced over her shoulder before stepping out of the doorway and shutting it behind her. She looked me up and down before speaking in a voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me, but I know you. I heard what happened back there. They're going to try to control you, make you think you're part of something you're not. Don't trust them." I stared at her, unsure whether I should be relieved to see someone who seemed to care or terrified that she was just another player in this tangled mess. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice low. "And why should I trust you?" She glanced around again, her expression tense. "I can't tell you everything right now," she said quickly. "But I can tell you this, you're in danger. You've been pulled into something much bigger than a simple business deal. They've been watching you for weeks. You're more important than you think." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. More important. I was just a consultant. A regular person with a regular job. But these people were making it sound like I was the center of something monumental. "Why me?" I whispered, the question that had been gnawing at me since this all started. "Why me?" The woman's eyes softened for a moment, but there was still an edge of urgency in her voice. "I don't know the full story," she admitted. "But I know that you're connected to something, something powerful. And they'll do anything to make sure you don't figure it out. You have to be careful. You have to trust no one, especially them." I felt my heart race. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but I still didn't have enough to understand the full picture. "What do I do? How do I get out of this?" She shook her head, glancing around nervously. "You can't just walk away from this. It's already too late for that. But you can still control what happens next. If you want to stay safe, you need to dig into this. Find out what they're hiding. And remember, don't trust anyone who tries to tell you that you're just a passenger in this. I took a step back, trying to process everything she had just said. What if they find out I'm asking questions? Her eyes hardened. Then you won't be the only one who pays the price. But if you don't ask, if you don't dig deeper, they'll make sure you're erased from the picture entirely. I nodded slowly, trying to absorb the weight of her words. The silence around us seemed even more oppressive now, the air thick with unspoken tension. I was in the middle of something far bigger than I could have imagined, and the danger was closing in faster than I could keep up. Where do I start? I asked, my voice steadier now. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled a small, folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to me. This is a contact, she said. Someone on the inside. They can help you. But be careful, trust no one except them. Not even me. I took the paper, staring at it in my hand. A contact? Who could I trust in all of this? I won't forget this, I said quietly. Thank you. She gave a sharp nod, then turned quickly and disappeared into the shadows without another word. I stood there for a moment, holding the paper in my hand, staring at the hallway ahead of me. The pieces were finally coming together, but the picture they formed was more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. I was caught in the middle of something much larger than I had ever anticipated, and the choices I made next could determine not only my future, but the future of everyone connected to this mystery. I had to be smart, careful. There was no turning back now. With one final glance down the empty corridor, I stepped forward, determined to get to the truth, even if it meant walking into the heart of darkness. The contact's name was written in plain, unassuming handwriting on the paper the woman had given me, Maxine Keller. The name didn't ring any bells, but something about it felt oddly familiar, like I had heard it whispered somewhere before. I stood there for a moment, considering my options. On one hand, I could try to walk away from this, forget it all, and leave the airport. But deep down, I knew that was a fantasy. I was already too far in. My mind raced as I thought about what the woman had said, trust no one. It had to mean something. If this Maxine Keller was really on the inside, I had to find her. She could be my only lifeline. I stuffed the piece of paper into my pocket and hurried through the corridors, trying my best to stay low-key. My eyes darted to every passerby, searching for any sign of someone watching me. My heart thumped in my chest, as if it could somehow give away my anxiety. It was ridiculous. I hadn't done anything wrong yet, but everything about this place felt dangerous. Everyone here was a potential threat. I finally found the security office where I was told Maxine worked. It was tucked away in a quiet corner of the airport, out of sight from the general hustle and bustle. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear the low hum of a conversation inside. I hesitated for a moment, then knocked gently. A voice called out, "Come in." I pushed the door open carefully, finding a small, dimly lit room. Maxine was seated at a desk, looking at a screen filled with flight schedules and security footage. She didn't turn to look at me immediately, but I could feel her awareness as soon as I stepped inside. Her eyes flicked up from the screen, scanning me with a practiced glance. "You're late," she said flatly, her voice low. There was no warmth in it, no indication of whether she was happy or irritated to see me. She just was. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the nerves that had built up inside me. "I'm here," I said quietly. "I need your help." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a small tablet. With a few swipes, she brought up a file with my name at the top. "You're deeper in this than you think," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The people you're dealing with, they're not just airport agents or businessmen. They're part of something much more secretive, something global. I don't know how much you've figured out, but you've got to understand, this isn't about a simple tech startup. This is about control. Power. And your involvement is key." I felt my chest tighten. I don't understand, I whispered. What do you mean by control? What's going on? She set the tablet down, locking eyes with me for the first time. Future tech isn't just about artificial intelligence or quantum computing. It's about harnessing something far more powerful, a new kind of technology that can change everything. But more than that, it's about creating a system where a select few hold all the power. And they've chosen you as a part of their plan. My mind was spinning. I didn't choose this, I said, my voice rising slightly. I didn't ask for any of this. I'm just trying to do my job. Maxine leaned back in her chair, her gaze unwavering. You don't have to choose, but you're already in it. They've been grooming you without your knowledge, setting up a series of events that would lead you here. Your job, it's a cover. You're part of something bigger than you realize. The problem is, they don't need you to know. As long as you're useful, they'll keep you in the dark. I shook my head, struggling to grasp what she was saying. Why me? Why did they pick me? She sighed, rubbing her eyes as if the answer were something she wished she could forget. You're tied to a legacy. One you don't remember but that they've been tracing for years. Your bloodline, your connections, they're tied to a fortune, a tech empire that's been quietly building for decades. Future tech wasn't just started by anyone. It was started by someone you're connected to. I froze. A legacy? I repeated, my throat dry. You're telling me I'm part of some tech dynasty? Maxine gave a stiff nod. It's more than that. They've been watching you, waiting for you to wake up. And once you do, you'll have a choice, join them or fight against them. But be careful. If you choose to fight, there are people who will make sure you never see another day. You're more of a target than you think. I was paralyzed, my mind struggling to keep up with the barrage of information. A tech dynasty. A hidden legacy. I had no recollection of any of this. All I had were questions and the growing fear that the more I learned, the less I would be able to control my own life. How do I stop them? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Maxine's eyes darkened. That's the real question. The harder you fight, the more dangerous it becomes. But I'll tell you this, you can't stay here much longer. They know you're on to them. You need to make a choice, and you need to make it fast. Trust no one, and don't believe everything you see. They will manipulate you into thinking you're part of something good. But remember, this is not about saving the world. This is about taking it for themselves. My heart pounded as the weight of her words sank in. The choice she spoke of, there was no clear answer. The deeper I went, the more I realized that the only thing certain about this situation was its danger. But I couldn't stop now. I had to know who was pulling the strings, and I had to know what role I was really meant to play in their game. Maxine stood up abruptly, her face set. Go, she said, her voice quiet but urgent. They're already on to you. You've got to move before they close in. Find the truth before they erase it. I nodded, the cold dread in my gut settling in once more. This wasn't just a fight for my life anymore. This was a fight for the future, one I wasn't sure I was ready for. But there was no turning back. Not now. With one last look at Maxine, I turned and left the office, stepping into the unknown, where the stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. I barely made it out of the security office before the panic started to settle in. I knew now that there was no way I could go back to my normal life, whatever normal was anymore. The reality that I was entangled in a web of power, secrecy, and manipulation hit me harder than I had expected. But even with the fear rising in my chest, I knew I couldn't stop now. I had to find the truth, whatever it took. Maxine's warning echoed in my mind, trust no one. I had no idea where to start, but I knew one thing for certain, the people behind this, whoever they were, had resources and connections that stretched far beyond this airport. The question was, who could I trust in a world where everyone seemed to have an agenda? And more importantly, who had the answers I needed to uncover the truth. I needed to get out of the airport, away from the eyes that were surely watching me. I had to find somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, where I could plan my next move. But with every step I took, the feeling that I was being tracked only intensified. The air around me felt charged with the weight of all the unseen eyes on me. As I reached the exit of the airport, I spotted a small cafe off to the side, tucked into a corner. It was almost empty, with only a few people scattered around tables, their heads buried in laptops or books. It was quiet. Peaceful. Exactly what I needed right now. I stepped inside, keeping my head down, and found a corner table where I could keep an eye on the door. The soft hum of conversation and clinking of coffee cups seemed far away, like I was hearing it from underwater. My thoughts were elsewhere, consumed by the overwhelming weight of the situation I had found myself in. I sat down and took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I needed a plan. I needed information. And I needed to move quickly. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only number I had, Maxine's. My hands trembled as I pressed the call button, waiting for the phone to ring. It felt like the longest moment of my life, but then, she answered. "Did you leave?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I need more answers, Maxine. I can't keep running blind. You told me I was part of something, but you didn't tell me enough." There was a brief pause on the other end, and I could feel her considering her next words carefully. "Listen to me," she said finally. "You're on the right track. But you need to move quickly. There's a network, a group of people who have been working in the shadows for years. They've built a system that controls everything, the tech world, the economy, and even the politics behind it all. They've been planning for this for a long time. They don't want you to know who you really are, because if you figure it out, it could destroy everything they've built." My heart raced. What do you mean by, who I really am? Why me? What makes me so important to them? Maxine's voice softened, but the urgency was still there. "It's not just you. It's your bloodline. Your family. I know it sounds crazy, but the pieces are all connected. Your family name has ties to some of the most powerful tech moguls in the world. And the truth about your role in this, well, it's not something anyone wants you to know." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push back the wave of disbelief crashing over me. "You're telling me that my family has been involved in this for years? And I've never known?" "Exactly," Maxine confirmed. "They've kept you in the dark, making sure you stay unaware of your own legacy. But now that you've uncovered part of the truth, they'll do whatever it takes to silence you. The network I'm talking about, those behind future tech, they won't stop until they have full control of you. They can't let you wake up completely." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. How do I stop them? She was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. "You can't take them on directly. Not yet. The best thing you can do right now is dig deeper, but quietly. There's a safe house, a place where you can stay hidden, where you can access more information about your family's connection to this network. It's off the grid. But you have to get there without being followed. If you go straight there, they'll know you're coming. It's a game of chess, and you need to be 3 steps ahead." My mind was reeling. A safe house? Off the grid? This was turning into something far beyond anything I had ever expected. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rush of fear flooding through me. She hesitated, then gave me an address. It was a location far from the airport, deep in the city, away from prying eyes. "Go there. Lay low. Find the truth before they do." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I'll go. But if anything happens to me, nothing will happen to you if you're careful," she interrupted. "But remember, this isn't just about you anymore. This is bigger than both of us." I disconnected the call and sat there for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. I was caught in a web of power and secrecy, and now I was running out of time. I stood up from the table, my mind sharp and focused. I had a destination, but I still didn't know who to trust. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I had a purpose. And I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered the truth about what was really happening, and the part one played in it. As I stepped out of the cafe and into the street, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. The hunt was on. And I was ready to find out just how deep this conspiracy went. The night air was cool against my skin as I made my way toward the location Maxine had given me. The city buzzed around me, a living, breathing entity unaware of the invisible battle unfolding just beneath the surface. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, but I pushed on. There was no turning back now. As I walked, my mind raced with the possibilities. Maxine's words, the cryptic warnings, the unsettling truth about my family's involvement, it all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How had I been so blind? What had I been a part of all these years without even knowing it? The address she had given me was for an abandoned building in the outskirts of the city. The area was quiet, far removed from the chaos of the airport and the bustle of the central business district. As I neared the building, I noticed that it was isolated, tucked between a row of industrial warehouses, their dark, silent forms looming like sentinels. The streetlights flickered above me, casting long, eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. I approached the building cautiously, checking over my shoulder one last time to make sure I wasn't being followed. The quiet seemed deafening, the only sound the echo of my footsteps against the empty street. When I reached the door, it was slightly ajar, as though someone had been expecting me. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. The interior was dimly lit, with the faint scent of dust and old wood hanging in the air. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no one waiting for me in the main room, just a long hallway that led further into the building. I followed the path, each step feeling heavier than the last. At the end of the hallway, a door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was small, with a single desk and a chair. A computer sat on the desk, its screen displaying a simple password prompt. I walked up to the desk and hesitated. This was it, the moment where I would either uncover everything or fall deeper into their web. My hands shook slightly as I sat down and typed in the only password I could think of, my own name. The screen blinked, then unlocked. A flood of documents appeared in front of me. I scanned through them quickly, my eyes widening as the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. It was all true. Every word Maxine had said, every cryptic warning, was right. My family was at the center of this. Future Tech wasn't just a company, it was the tip of a much larger iceberg. The network they had been building for decades was not just about technology. It was about control. Power. An entire system designed to make sure a select few held all the cards. I kept reading, my mind reeling with the implications. There were names, dates, plans, everything I needed to know. And then, I found it, the document that tied it all together. Project Nexus. It was the code name for a secret initiative that my family had been a part of, an initiative to create a new form of technology that would give its creators unprecedented control over the global economy, politics, and even individual freedoms. The document detailed everything, the key players, the timeline, the funding sources. And it was clear that the final phase of the project was about to begin. And I, somehow, was supposed to be a part of it. I leaned back in my chair, trying to digest what I had just learned. This wasn't just about tech. This was about power. About a global system being set in place that no one would be able to escape. I wasn't just a consultant. I wasn't even just a pawn. I was the key. And I had no idea how deep my involvement really went. But I did know one thing, I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let my family, or anyone, continue down this path. The people behind this, the ones controlling everything from the shadows, they wouldn't stop until they had it all. I had to stop them. As I sat there, staring at the screen, the reality of my situation settled in. This was bigger than me. It was bigger than anything I had ever imagined. And I was now standing at the crossroads between fighting for the future or becoming part of the machine that would take it all. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw a text from Maxine. "They know. They're coming for you. Get out, now." I didn't need to think twice. I grabbed the documents from the screen and stuffed them into my bag, then bolted for the door. My heart raced, my breath coming in short gasps. I had no time to lose. I dashed down the hallway and out the back exit of the building, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. I wasn't just running for my life anymore, I was running to make sure this secret never saw the light of day. The system they had built, the power they sought to control, it had to end. And it was up to me to make sure it did. This was just the beginning.